My mom, Evelyn, was his opposite in every way. Warm, gentle, always ready with a hug when Charles wasn't around. But the moment he walked into a room, she'd shrink, her eyes flicking to him like she needed permission to breathe. I didn't get it when I was a kid, that strange power he held over her. The way she'd hesitate before answering simple questions, like what we were having for dinner. It wasn't until I was older that I saw it for what it was, a dynamic rooted in something deeper. Hey there, I'm Laura Bennett, 32 years old, and I've spent most of my life chasing something I could never quite catch. My father's approval. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? If you've ever felt like nothing you do is good enough for someone who's supposed to love you unconditionally, stick with me. This story's for you. It's raw, it's messy, and by the end, it just might give you the push to stand up to someone who's been blind to your worth. Let me take you back to a summer that changed everything, when I walked away from a family dinner with my head held high and a truth that set me free. I grew up in a picture-perfect coastal town just north of San Diego, California. Think sun-drenched beaches, palm trees swaying in the breeze, and houses with ocean views that screamed money. From the outside, the Bennett family had it all. My father, Charles Bennett, built a tech empire from a small startup in the 90s into a multi-million-dollar company that powered half the apps on your phone. Success was his religion. Status, respect, and winning, those were the gods he worshipped. Family? That came second, maybe third, if we were lucky. My earliest memories aren't of him tossing a ball in the backyard or cheering at my school plays. They're of his voice, sharp and cold, pointing out why my A- wasn't an A and why second place in the science fair was just another word for failure, something I wouldn't understand until that summer. My siblings and I grew up navigating this tightrope of a family. My older brother Nathan, 3 years ahead of me, was the golden child. Star quarterback, straight-A student dated the cheerleader from the Wright family. He slid into Dad's company after graduating from Stanford, Charles's alma mater, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Everything seemed effortless for Nathan, or at least that's how it looked to me. He had this knack for knowing exactly what would make Dad nod in approval, while I was always swinging and missing. My younger sister Claire, 2 years behind me, wasn't the overachiever Nathan was, but she had this quiet charm, a way of reading the room that let her skate through Dad's expectations. She could make him laugh when his mood turned dark and slip into my room after one of his brutal critiques to whisper that it wasn't as bad as I thought. Claire was the peacemaker, always smoothing things over. Me? I was the odd one out. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I graduated at the top of my high school class and earned a full ride to UCLA instead of Stanford, which Dad saw as a personal betrayal. "Why reject my legacy?" he'd said, his voice dripping with disappointment. In college, I juggled 2 part-time jobs and kept my GPA sparkling, but when I came home for breaks, he'd ask why I wasn't interning at Google or Apple. After graduation, I turned down his offer to join his company, knowing I'd just be the pity hire, the daughter he had to tolerate. Instead, I packed my bags and moved to Los Angeles, sleeping on a friend's couch while I applied to every tech firm in the city. When I landed an entry-level gig at a cybersecurity startup, his response was, "Let's see if you can hack it for a month." I didn't just hack it, I thrived. 8 years later, I'd climbed to senior cybersecurity analyst, the youngest in the company's history. Last spring, I got a promotion that came with a hefty salary bump, enough to buy a condo in Santa Monica with a sliver of ocean view. I'd built this life from scratch, no family connections, no handouts. Part of it was passion for the work, untangling digital threats like a puzzle. But if I'm honest, a bigger part was this burning need to prove him wrong, to make him see me as something other than a disappointment. That need led me to do something I can see now was desperate. I used my savings to buy Dad a gift I thought would finally crack that wall between us. A Tesla Model S, sleek, electric, top of the line, the kind of car he'd admired at a tech conference a few years back. It cost me nearly a year's salary, but in my head it was the golden ticket. I pictured him smiling, maybe even saying he was proud of me. Looking back, it's almost painful how much I pinned on that car, like it could buy the one thing every kid deserves: a parent's love given freely, no strings attached. The Bennett family reunion always happened the first weekend of July, timed to double as a celebration of Charles Bennett, the patriarch, the tech titan. This year, it loomed larger than ever. I'd decided to present the Tesla as a Father's Day gift, a grand gesture to stand out in a family that revolved around Dad's approval. As the date got closer, my stomach churned. I spent weeks picking out the perfect outfit: a tailored blazer and skirt, professional but not cold, feminine but not soft. The kind of balance Dad seemed to expect from women in tech. I wanted to look like I belonged in his world, even if I'd never felt like I did. Past reunions played in my mind like a bad movie. When I was 15, I won a regional coding competition, and Dad asked why I hadn't gone national. When I graduated UCLA with honors, he said tech was a risky field compared to his stable empire. My first big bonus at work? He called cybersecurity glorified IT. Every milestone, every win, he'd find a way to twist it, to make it less than. Nothing was ever just good enough. But this year was different, and not just because of the car. 3 months earlier, I'd done something out of curiosity that turned my world upside down. I'd taken one of those DNA tests, the kind that tells you if you're part Viking or whatever. I wasn't looking for drama. I just thought it'd be fun to see where the Bennett roots traced back. The results came back, and they didn't make sense. The paternal markers didn't match Charles Bennett. At first I thought it was a mistake. I mean, how could it not be? But doubt crept in, that lifelong feeling of being an outsider in my own family, the way I didn't quite look like Nathan or Claire, the way Dad's eyes slid past me like I was a stranger. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I went full detective, quietly getting a second test, more thorough, using a sample from Dad's comb during a quick visit home. The results landed in my inbox a month before the reunion, sealed in an envelope I kept in my purse. They were clear, undeniable. Charles Bennett was not my biological father. It explained everything. The coldness, the distance, the way he'd always treated me like I didn't belong. I started to suspect he'd known all along, that this secret had shaped every harsh word, every impossible standard. That envelope was a bomb, and I hadn't decided whether to detonate it. But it was there, in my purse, every time I thought about the reunion. A truth I couldn't unlearn. The day before the reunion, I drove the Tesla to my parents' sprawling estate in Del Mar, a cliffside mansion with glass walls and views of the Pacific. I'd had the car delivered to a local dealership, planning the moment carefully. Mom would be at her book club, so it'd just be me and Dad, a private chance to offer this gift, to see if it could shift something between us. My heart was pounding as I pulled into the driveway, the Tesla gleaming under the California sun. I grabbed the small box with the key fob, took a deep breath, and rang the bell. Dad answered, dressed in his usual weekend uniform, a crisp polo and slacks, like he was ready for a board meeting even on a Saturday. "Laura, you're early," he said, glancing at his watch, annoyance flickering across his face. "The reunion's tomorrow." "I know, Dad," I said, forcing a smile, my hands sweaty around the box. "I brought your Father's Day gift a day early. Wanted to give it to you privately." I handed him the box, the Tesla logo clear on the key fob. He opened it, his expression shifting from indifference to surprise, then something close to suspicion. "Is this a joke?" he asked, his voice flat. I gestured to the window where the Tesla sat in the driveway, its curves catching the light. His eyes widened just for a second, and I thought I saw a flash of something like joy. But it vanished as fast as it came. He stepped outside, key in hand, circling the car like he was inspecting a new server rack. "This is extravagant, Laura," he said, his tone sharp. "What's the point of this?" My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. "No point, Dad. I got a big promotion and I wanted to do something special for you." It was a lie, and we both knew it. I was trying to prove something, and he wasn't buying it. He asked a string of questions about the financing, the battery range, and the resale value, like I was a salesman pitching him. We took a short test drive, and he commented that the acceleration felt off, even though the car was flawless. When we got back, he parked it in the garage, out of sight, like he didn't want anyone to know it existed. "Thanks," he said, clipped, then added, "You must be doing well to throw money around like this." The words cut deep, turning my gesture into something reckless, wasteful. That night, in my hotel room, I called my best friend Mia, my voice shaking as I told her how it went. "He acted like I'd insulted him," I said, fighting tears. "I spent a fortune and he just dismissed it." "Forget him, Laura," Mia said, her voice fierce. "Take the car back. He doesn't deserve it." I laughed it off, still clinging to some pathetic hope that the reunion would be different, that in front of the family he'd see the car, see me, for what we were worth. "Just promise me you won't show him that test," Mia said before we hung up. "Not unless you're ready for everything to blow up." "I promise," I said, but my fingers brushed the envelope in my purse, the weight of it heavier than ever. Tomorrow was the reunion, and I had no idea what I'd do with the truth I was carrying. All I knew was that I was tired, so tired, of trying to be enough for a man who'd never see me. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The morning of the Bennett family reunion, I woke up in my hotel room with a knot in my stomach that no amount of coffee could loosen. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the walls with a soft California glow, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. Today was the day I'd present the Tesla to the whole family, the day I'd stand in the spotlight of Charles Bennett's world, and hope, against all evidence, that he'd finally see me. I slipped into the blazer and skirt I'd agonized over, checked my reflection one last time, and grabbed my purse. The envelope with the DNA test results felt like it weighed 100 pounds, but I couldn't leave it behind. Not today. The drive to my parents' Del Mar estate was a blur of ocean views and palm-lined streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, as I rehearsed answers to the questions I knew were coming. "Why aren't you married yet, Laura? Isn't cybersecurity a man's field? When are you joining the family business?" At 32, I should have been used to it, but the thought of facing that room full of judgment made my chest tight. I turned into the driveway, already lined with gleaming SUVs and sports cars, the kind of vehicles that screamed tech money. And there, parked right by the front entrance, was the Tesla. Not tucked away in the garage like yesterday, but on display, its black paint catching the midday sun. My heart lifted for a split second, thinking maybe Dad had reconsidered. Maybe he was proud. Then I saw the way it was positioned, angled perfectly for guests to admire as they arrived, and I knew. This wasn't about me. It was about him. I took a deep breath, smoothed my blazer, and stepped out of my rental car. The mansion loomed ahead, all glass and sharp angles, like something out of a tech magazine. Mom answered the door, her face breaking into a warm smile that felt like a lifeline. "Laura, you're here," she said, pulling me into a hug. Her perfume, the same floral scent she'd worn since I was a kid, wrapped around me like a memory of safer times. "You look stunning, sweetheart," she whispered, then leaned back, her eyes flickering with something like worry. "Your father's out back with the board members. You know how he gets." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks, Mom." Her warning was gentle, but it carried weight. Charles Bennett didn't just host a reunion. He orchestrated it, every moment choreographed to reinforce his status as the family's center of gravity. I stepped into the foyer, already buzzing with relatives and Dad's hand-picked honorary family, the tech moguls and investors he treated like blood. Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, swooped in with a hug and a barrage of questions about my love life. "No special someone yet, Laura? A catch like you?" I laughed it off, deflecting with a vague promise to keep looking. Uncle Tom clapped me on the shoulder, his voice booming. "There's our cyber genius, keeping the internet safe, huh?" I grinned, but my eyes scanned the room, bracing for Dad's entrance. He didn't disappoint. Charles Bennett swept in from the backyard, trailed by 3 men in tailored suits, their laughter loud and performative, the kind that only happens when the boss is talking. His presence filled the space, broad shoulders, silver hair, and that commanding smile he'd perfected in boardrooms. His gaze moved across the crowd, doling out nods like currency, each one a transaction of acknowledgement. When his eyes landed on me, I held my breath, waiting for something, anything, to show he saw me. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, then a slight tightening of his jaw, and he nodded, the same curt gesture he'd given a distant cousin moments before. No greeting, no warmth, just a checkmark that I was present. He moved on, leaning in to murmur something to Mom, and I stood there, the sting of dismissal sharp and familiar. I busied myself with small talk, catching up with my cousin Emily about her new yoga studio, but my attention kept drifting to Dad. He was holding court near the glass doors, gesturing toward the driveway where the Tesla sat. I edged closer, catching fragments of his conversation. "Latest model," he was saying, his voice brimming with pride. "Fully autonomous cutting-edge tech. You've got to see it." He led his group outside, and I followed at a distance, my heart pounding. Through the windows, I watched him open the Tesla's doors, pointing out features, his face alive with an enthusiasm I'd never seen directed at me. He slid into the driver's seat, letting one of his associates try the passenger side, and the group nodded, impressed. Not once did he mention me, the promotion that paid for it, or the gesture behind it. It was his car, his triumph, as if I'd never existed. Claire appeared at my side, pressing a glass of wine into my hand. "He's been showing it off all morning," she said softly, her eyes full of understanding. "Mom told me you bought it for him, Laura. That's incredible." Her voice was warm, but it only deepened the ache in my chest. I sipped the wine, watching Dad laugh with his cronies, the Tesla gleaming like a trophy. "It wasn't about being incredible," I admitted, my voice low. "I just wanted him to see me, just once." The words felt raw, exposing a truth I hadn't even said to Mia. Claire squeezed my arm, her touch grounding me. "It's not your fault he can't," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You're not the problem, Laura. He is." Her words hit like a wave, stirring something I wasn't ready to face. I'd spent my whole life blaming myself, twisting myself into knots to meet his standards. But what if Claire was right? What if the issue wasn't my failures, but his inability to love me the way he loved Nathan and Claire? The envelope in my purse seemed to hum with possibility, a truth that could explain it all or destroy everything. The reunion settled into its familiar rhythm. Guests drifted to the living room, sprawling across cream-colored sofas that looked more like art installations than furniture. Mom's touch was everywhere, in the curated decor, the vases of fresh lilies, and the framed photos of Nathan's football days and Claire's charity galas. My face was absent from those frames, a quiet erasure I'd stopped noticing years ago. I found a spot by the window, nursing my wine, watching the family play their parts. Nathan arrived late, as always, with his wife Jessica and their 2 kids, all polished and perfect. Dad greeted him with a bear hug, the kind I'd spent my life chasing, and I heard Nathan say, "That Tesla's unreal, Dad. When did you decide to splurge?" Dad clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. "You earn it, you enjoy it, son. That's how it works." No mention of me. No hint that the car wasn't his idea. I turned away, my throat tight, and caught Mom's eye across the room. She started toward me, her expression soft. "Laura, your father told me about the car," she said, her voice low, like she was sharing a secret. "It's so generous, sweetheart. I know he appreciates it." Her words were kind, but the pity in her eyes told me she knew he didn't. She touched my arm, guiding me toward a group of Dad's colleagues. "Come say hi to the Wilsons. They were at a tech summit in Seattle, and they'd love your take on cybersecurity trends." It was her way, always smoothing things over, creating excuses for connection where none existed naturally. I played along, slipping into my professional voice, the one I used in meetings with skeptical clients. The Wilsons were polite, asking about my work, But I could feel Dad's presence across the room, his laughter cutting through the hum of conversation. Every time I glanced over, he was showing off the Tesla to a new group, his pride palpable, my role invisible. The weight of it pressed on me, the years of being overlooked, of pouring everything into proving I was enough, only to be erased again. Claire found me again, her expression tense. "He's doing it on purpose," she whispered, handing me another glass of wine. "Showing off the car like it's his. It's not fair, Laura." Her anger on my behalf was a small comfort, but it also sharpened the truth I'd been dodging. Dad wasn't just indifferent. He was rewriting the narrative, claiming my gesture as his own, just like he'd always claimed credit for Nathan's successes while dismissing mine. "I don't know why I thought this would be different," I said, my voice barely audible. "I keep trying, and he keeps—" I trailed off, unable to finish. Claire's eyes softened, and she leaned closer. "Listen to me," she said, her voice steady. "You don't need his approval to be who you are. You're enough, Laura. You've always been enough." Her words were a lifeline, but they also stirred the secret I was carrying. The DNA test, the proof that I wasn't his, the reason he'd never loved me the way a father should. I wanted to tell her, to spill it all, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, sipping my wine, watching Dad through the window as he opened the Tesla's trunk for another admiring guest. The afternoon wore on, the air thick with the scent of grilled seafood and expensive cologne. I moved through the crowd, smiling, nodding, playing the part of the successful daughter, but inside, I was unraveling. Every laugh from Dad, every proud glance at Nathan, every casual dismissal of me. It all fed the pressure building in my chest. The envelope in my purse was no longer just a secret. It was a choice, one I wasn't sure I was ready to make. But as I watched Dad bask in the glow of a gift he hadn't earned, I knew something had to give. This couldn't go on forever. Not like this. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden haze over the Del Mar estate, the Bennett family reunion shifted gears. The crowd migrated from the living room to the dining room, a space that felt more like a museum than a home. A long mahogany table stretched under a chandelier that glittered like a constellation, each place setting arranged with precision, from the monogrammed napkins to the polished silver. It was Mom's handiwork, every detail screaming elegance, but to me, it was just another stage for Dad's performance. I found my name card halfway down the table, tucked between Cousin Emily's husband, a guy I barely knew, and one of Dad's younger colleagues, a tech bro who probably thought cybersecurity was just hacking stuff. Nathan and his family sat near Dad at the head, Claire and her husband close by, while Mom anchored the far end, her smile tight, like she was bracing for a storm. I settled into my seat, smoothing my skirt, the envelope in my purse a silent weight against my thigh. The room hummed with chatter, relatives catching up, and Dad's business associates swapping stories about stock options and startups. Wait staff glided in, setting down plates of grilled salmon with some fancy herb drizzle, and I tried to focus on the food, on Emily's husband droning about his golf swing, anything to keep my mind off Dad. But his presence was inescapable, like the pull of the tide. He stood at the head of the table, wine glass raised, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "To family," he said, his smile practiced, his eyes scanning the room. "To legacy, to building something that lasts." Everyone lifted their glasses, murmuring agreement, but his gaze skipped over me, landing on Nathan with a nod of pride. I sipped my wine, the bitterness on my tongue more than just the drink. Dinner unfolded like a script I'd memorized years ago. Dad steered the conversation, tossing questions to his associates about market trends, nudging Nathan to share his latest deal, a software acquisition that had made headlines. "That's my boy," Dad said, his voice warm when Nathan described outbidding a rival firm. "Sees the big picture just like I taught him." Nathan soaked it up, his grin easy, while Jessica beamed beside him. Claire got her moment too, Dad praising her work on a local arts council, calling it A touch of class for the Bennett name. She blushed, deflecting with a laugh, but I could see she was pleased. I sat there, picking at my salmon, waiting for the inevitable. Dad's attention would turn to me, not with praise, but with a question, a comment, or something designed to remind everyone I'd never measure up. It didn't take long. As the second course, some kind of roasted vegetable medley, hit the table, Dad's colleague, the tech bro next to me, leaned over. "Laura, I hear you're big in cybersecurity. That's like super niche, right? Congrats on the promotion." His tone was genuine, and for a moment I let myself relax, ready to explain my work. Before I could, Dad cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the table. "Niche is one way to put it," he said, swirling his wine. "Cybersecurity's a small pond, Laura. Important, sure, but limited. You're mostly protecting data, not creating anything tangible, right?" His smile was sharp, like he was stating a fact, not throwing a jab. The table went quiet, forks pausing mid-air, and I felt every eye on me. I took a slow breath, channeling the calm I used in client meetings. "Actually, my team's work secures entire networks," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Last quarter, we stopped a breach that could have cost our clients billions, and my risk model's being rolled out globally." I met his gaze, daring him to push back. For a second, the table seemed impressed, Emily nodding slightly, Claire's eyes flashing with support. Dad leaned back, unfazed. "Numbers are one thing," he said, his tone dismissive. "But tech's about innovation, building something real. Data protection's just maintenance, not vision." He turned to his associate, Mark, shifting the topic. "Speaking of vision, what's your take on the new AI regulations?" Just like that, I was erased, my work reduced to maintenance, my promotion a footnote. Claire caught my eye, her expression apologetic, but I looked away, my jaw tight. The meal pressed on, course after course, each one more elaborate than the last. Mom tried to pivot the conversation, her voice soft but deliberate. "Laura's promotion was a big deal," she said during a lull, her smile fragile. "Youngest senior analyst in her company's history. That's something to celebrate." I felt a flicker of gratitude, but before I could thank her, Dad cut in. "Timing's everything," he said, slicing into his steak. "Her firm landed a big contract right before, didn't they? Nathan made the introduction to their CEO at a conference last year. Connections matter." His words landed like a slap, rewriting my success as something owed to Nathan, not earned. Nathan shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable, but he didn't correct him. "That's not true," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I won that contract through a competitive pitch. No introductions." The words hung in the air, and for a moment I thought I'd scored a point. But Dad just shrugged, his smile patronizing. "Either way, it's a start," he said, turning back to Mark. "Now, about those regulations." The conversation moved on, leaving me to simmer in silence. Claire reached under the table, squeezing my hand, but it barely registered. The envelope in my purse felt like it was burning, the truth inside screaming to be let out. I wanted to stand, to throw it on the table and to demand answers. But I held back, my heart racing, telling myself to wait, to endure, just a little longer. As dessert arrived, a delicate lemon tart that tasted like ash in my mouth, Dad's attention swung back to me. Mrs. Wilson, one of his associates' wives, smiled warmly from across the table. "Laura, you're doing so well in LA," she said. "Still single, though? A woman like you must have no shortage of suitors." Her tone was kind and curious, the kind of question I'd fielded 1,000,000 times. I opened my mouth to respond, something polite about focusing on my career, but Dad beat me to it. "Laura's always been too busy chasing titles," he said, his voice tinged with bourbon and mockery. "Work's her priority, not family. Some women prefer it that way, I suppose." He leaned back, sipping his drink, his words slicing through me. It wasn't just a jab at my single status. It was a judgment, painting my career as a substitute for a real life, something lesser than the family Nathan and Claire had built. Mom gasped softly, her fork clinking against her plate. "Charles," she said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard. But he ignored her, his eyes locked on me, daring me to react. The table went still again, relatives staring at their plates, associates shifting awkwardly. I felt the old urge to run, to hide, the way I had as a kid when his words cut too deep. But I was 32 now, not 12, and something inside me was shifting, hardening. "Thank you for your concern, Dad," I said, my voice calm, almost cold. "But I'm happy with my choices. My career's delivered results, measurable ones. Family's important, but so is building something for myself." I held his gaze, my hands steady, even as my heart pounded. The silence stretched, heavy, until Mark cleared his throat, mumbling something about the tart being delicious, and the moment passed. But it didn't pass for me. Each of Dad's comments, each calculated slight, was stacking up like bricks in a wall I couldn't climb anymore. The envelope in my purse wasn't just a secret now, it was a weapon, one I was starting to realize I might have to use. Claire's words from earlier echoed in my head. "You're not the problem, Laura." He is. For the first time, I was starting to believe her. But believing wasn't enough. I needed to act, to stop letting him rewrite my story, to stop begging for a love he'd never give. As the staff cleared dessert plates, I knew the night was far from over. Dad's big speech was coming, the one he always gave, and I could feel it in my bones. Something was about to break. Whether it was me or the lie we'd all been living, I wasn't sure, but I was ready to find out. The Delmar dining room glowed under the chandelier's soft light, but the warmth was a lie. The table, laden with empty dessert plates and half-filled coffee cups, felt like a battlefield, and I was losing ground. The reunion had been a slow grind, each of Dad's slights chipping away at me, but I could sense the worst was coming. Charles Bennett never let a family gathering end without a speech, his moment to cement his role as the untouchable patriarch. My fingers grazed the envelope in my purse, tucked against my thigh, its contents a secret I hadn't planned to unleash. But as the waitstaff cleared the last of the lemon tarts, I felt a shift, like the air before a storm breaks. Claire's eyes met mine across the table, her expression tense, urging me to hold on. But I was tired, so tired of holding on. Dad rose from his seat, brandy snifter in hand, his broad frame casting a shadow over the polished mahogany. The room fell silent, a reflex born from years of his command. Even the clink of silverware stopped, every guest turning to him like he was the sun and we were just planets in his orbit. His silver hair caught the light, his smile practiced, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd with the precision of a CEO sizing up a deal. "Before we step outside for the family photo," he began, his voice rich, carrying that boardroom cadence, "I want to take a moment to honor what it means to be a Bennett. This family, this legacy, it's more than a name. It's a promise to strive, to build, to leave something that endures." His words were grand, but I knew this script. He'd praise Nathan, then Claire, their achievements polished trophies in his collection. Me? I'd be the afterthought if I was mentioned at all. My heart thudded, a mix of dread and defiance, as he turned to Nathan, raising his glass. "Nathan, your work at the company is nothing short of remarkable," he said, his tone warm, almost reverent. "That software deal you closed, outmaneuvering every competitor, it's the kind of vision that defines us. You've taken what I've built and made it stronger. I'm proud of you, son, beyond words." Nathan nodded, his grin easy and confident, the golden child basking in his rightful place. The table murmured a chorus of agreement, and I gripped my coffee cup, the porcelain cool against my palms, trying to anchor myself. Dad's gaze shifted to Claire, softening in a way that made my chest ache. "And Claire," he said, his voice gentler, "your dedication to our community, your poise as a mother, you bring a grace to the Bennett name that's irreplaceable. Your arts council work, it's not just charity, it's legacy, showing the world what we stand for. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder." Claire's cheeks flushed, her smile shy but genuine, and she ducked her head, deflecting the spotlight. The room clapped, a soft ripple, and Mom's eyes shone from the far end of the table, her hands clasped tightly, like she was holding on to the moment. Then his eyes found me. My breath caught, a foolish spark of hope flaring, even after all these years. Maybe he'd mentioned the Tesla, the promotion, or something to show I wasn't invisible. But his smile twisted, sharp and cold, like a blade catching the light. "When I think about my children," he said, his voice slowing, deliberate, "I'm struck by how success can be misinterpreted." He sipped his brandy, the pause a weapon, letting the tension coil. "I'm proud of all my children," he announced, his glass lifting higher, and for a fleeting second I believed him. Then his gaze locked on mine, and he added, "Except for the loser at this table." The words landed like a thunderclap, shattering the room's fragile calm. A stunned silence swallowed the air, followed by uneasy chuckles, guests assuming it was a jest, some private family humor. But I felt my face burn, then go cold, my pulse roaring in my ears. Every eye turned to me, some pitying, some curious, some embarrassed, pinning me in place. Dad pressed on, his tone casual, as if he'd remarked on the wine. "Some people chase fleeting victories, titles, paychecks, things that glitter but don't last. True success is loyalty, adding to the family's foundation, not clawing for attention at its expense." His words were vague, but their aim was surgical. I was the loser, the one who'd never fit his mold. Mom's face drained of color, her napkin crumpled in her fists. Nathan's lips twitched, a smug flicker he didn't bother to hide. Claire's hand shot to mine under the table, her grip fierce, her eyes blazing with something like fury. Cousin Emily leaned forward, her touch on my arm a quiet lifeline, but I was drowning. My whole life flashed through me, every moment I'd fought to prove myself, every achievement Dad had dismissed, every night I'd cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough. And now, in front of family, friends, and his precious associates, he'd stripped me bare, branded me a failure for all to see. But something inside me didn't break. It hardened, crystallized, like a fire turning coal to diamond. I'd spent 32 years begging for his love, reshaping myself to fit his impossible standards. And for what? To be humiliated, reduced to a punchline? The envelope in my purse wasn't just a secret anymore. It was the truth, the answer to why he'd always pushed me away, why I'd never belonged. And in that moment I knew I couldn't keep it buried, not after this. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor, the sound cutting through the silence. Every head turned, eyes widening, expecting tears, a retreat, the broken girl they thought I was. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. My hands were steady, my voice waiting, ready. "Thank you, Dad," I said, clear and calm, each word deliberate, slicing through the room's tension. That speech was revealing. I paused, holding his gaze, watching a flicker of unease cross his face. He hadn't expected defiance, not from me, the daughter he'd trained to shrink. "For 32 years, I continued, my voice growing stronger, "I've chased your approval, twisted myself into knots to meet standards you kept moving. I thought it was my fault, that if I worked harder and achieved more, I'd be enough. But it was never about me, was it?" My hand moved to my purse, fingers closing around the envelope. The room was a void. No whispers, no clinks, just the weight of my words. Mom's eyes widened, her breath catching. Nathan leaned forward, alert. Claire's grip on my hand tightened, urging me on. "I built a career from nothing," I said, my voice steady but laced with pain. "Top of my class at UCLA, youngest senior analyst in my company's history. I bought you a Tesla, not because you deserved it, but because I hoped it would make you see me. But you can't see me, can you? And now I know why." I pulled the envelope out, holding it up, the paper stark against the chandelier's glow. Gasps circled the table, sharp and quick, like a flock of startled birds. Dad's face froze, his brandy glass still in his hand, knuckles whitening. "I blamed myself for your coldness," I said, my voice breaking, not from weakness but from the raw truth spilling out. Every criticism, every comparison, I thought it was me, but it's this. I placed the envelope on the table, deliberate, the soft thud louder than a shout. "That's a DNA test, Dad. It proves you're not my father. That's why I've always been the loser to you, isn't it? Because I was never yours." The words hung heavy, final, a truth I'd carried alone now laid bare for all to see. The silence was deafening, a vacuum sucking the life from the room. Mom's hand covered her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears. Nathan's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to Dad. Claire's breath hitched, her hand still in mine, a lifeline I didn't know I needed. Dad stared at the envelope, his face a mask, but I saw the crack, the slightest tremor in his hand. The room waited, breathless, for his response, but I didn't need it. I'd said what I came to say. I turned, my steps measured, my spine straight, the weight of 32 years falling away with each one. The dining room faded behind me, the murmurs starting as I crossed the foyer, voices overlapping into a chaotic hum. The front door loomed ahead, cool night air seeping through the glass. I pushed it open, the ocean breeze hitting my face, salty and sharp, like a wake-up call. The Tesla sat in the driveway, its sleek lines gleaming under the estate's lanterns, a monument to my misplaced hope. My fingers found the spare key fob, the car unlocking with a gentle chirp, absurdly cheerful in the moment's gravity. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool, the dashboard glowing softly, welcoming me like an old friend. Through the dining room windows, I saw movement, shadows gesturing, faces pressed to the glass, a drama unfolding without me. The front door burst open, and there was Dad, the envelope clutched in his fist, his silhouette framed in the light. His mouth moved, maybe my name, maybe a curse, but the Tesla's engine purred to life, drowning him out. I eased the car down the driveway, the mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror, its grandeur fading into the dusk. The Tesla wasn't just a gift I'd given and taken back. It was me, my worth, my right to exist without his shadow. He'd claimed it as his, just like he'd claimed credit for my life while dismissing my heart. Now I was reclaiming it all, driving away from a lie I'd lived too long. The road opened before me, dark and endless, and for the first time, I felt something new. Not happiness, not yet, but freedom, raw and uncharted. I didn't look back. The Tesla's tires hummed against the asphalt, carrying me away from the Del Mar estate, its lights fading into a blur in the rearview mirror. The ocean breeze slipped through the cracked window, cool and salty, tugging at my hair, but it couldn't touch the storm inside me. I'd done it. I'd dropped the truth like a grenade, walked away from Charles Bennett's world, and taken back the car I'd thought could buy his love. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady despite the tremor in my chest. I wasn't sure where I was going, just that I needed distance, space to breathe, to feel the weight of what I'd done. The road stretched dark and quiet, the Pacific glinting under a sliver of moon, and for the first time in years, I felt untethered, like a kite cut loose, soaring but unsteady, free but falling. I drove aimlessly, the Tesla's dashboard glowing softly, its silence a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. My mind replayed the moment. Dad's face as I set the envelope on the table, the shock rippling through the room, Mom's hand over her mouth, Claire's grip on mine. I'd spent 32 years chasing a man who wasn't my father, begging for scraps of approval he'd never give. The DNA test had confirmed it. Charles Bennett wasn't my dad, but saying it out loud in front of everyone had made it real in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just a fact now. It was a wound, raw and open, and I didn't know how to close it. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up with Claire's name. I let it ring, not ready to face her or anyone. The call went to voicemail, then another buzz, a text, then another call. Nathan, Mom, Cousin Emily. The names stacked up like evidence of the explosion I'd triggered. I silenced the ringer but kept the phone on, some part of me needing to see the fallout, to know it was real. I pulled into a hotel parking lot in Encinitas, a small boutique place with fairy lights strung across the courtyard, the kind of spot I'd normally love. Tonight it was just a refuge, a place to stop running, at least for a few hours. I checked in, my voice calm as I handed over my card, but my hands shook when I got to the room. I kicked off my heels, sank onto the edge of the bed, and finally let myself look at the phone. 22 missed calls, 37 texts, a digital tsunami. I started with Claire's messages, her words spilling across the screen in a frantic stream. "Laura, what just happened? What was in that envelope?" Then, "Please call me, everyone's losing it." Her last text, sent just minutes ago, hit harder. "I'm worried about you, sis. Wherever you are, just tell me you're okay. I love you." Her love, simple and fierce, cracked something in me, a sob catching in my throat. Claire had always been my ally, but this was different. She'd seen the truth now, and she was still reaching out. Mom's voicemails started measured, her voice soft, pleading. "Laura, sweetheart, please call when you can. We need to talk." By her fourth message, her composure was fraying, her words breaking. "The test! It can't be right, can it? There's got to be a mistake. Come back, let's figure this out together." Her pain was palpable, and for the first time I wondered what this secret had cost her, what it meant to carry it all these years. I wanted to call to ask why she'd never told me, but I couldn't yet, not when my own heart was still reeling. Nathan's texts were colder and more predictable. "Return the car, Laura. It's Dad's property and you know it." Then, "Those accusations were out of line. Retract them, or we'll have to get legal." His loyalty to Dad didn't surprise me, but it stung all the same. Nathan had always been the golden son, the one who fit seamlessly into Dad's world. Of course he'd side with him even now, even with the truth staring him in the face. I deleted his messages, my fingers steady, refusing to let his threats pull me back into their orbit. The most unexpected message came an hour later, from Mom's private number, one she rarely used. It wasn't a call, just a text, long and uncharacteristically raw. "Laura, I never wanted you to learn this way. There was no affair, I promise. Before your father, there was someone else in college. When I found out I was pregnant, Charles offered to marry me to give you his name. He tried to love you, I believe he did, but some men can't see past biology. I should have told you, protected you better. I failed you. Can we meet tomorrow, just us? You deserve the whole truth." I read it twice, my breath shallow, the words blurring through tears. Mom hadn't betrayed Dad, but she'd carried this secret, a choice made in a different time, under pressures I couldn't fully grasp. Her apology, her plea to meet, it stirred a mix of anger and pity, love and betrayal. I set the phone down, not ready to reply, not sure I ever would be. I moved to the window, the hotel overlooking Encinitas' quiet streets, the distant crash of waves a steady pulse. My reflection stared back, familiar but strange, like I was seeing myself for the first time. Who was I, if not Charles Bennett's daughter? The question had haunted me since the DNA test, but now, in this quiet room, it felt less like a void and more like a door, one I could choose to walk through. The test hadn't just severed me from Dad, it had opened a mystery, a biological father out there, someone whose eyes I might share, whose traits I carried without knowing. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling, a piece of me waiting to be found. My mind drifted to the reunion, the moment I'd stood up, the envelope in my hand. I hadn't planned it, not really, but Dad's words, "Accept the loser," had been the final straw. I could still see his face, the shock as I spoke, the crack in his armor when I said he wasn't my father. For years, I'd thought his coldness was my fault, that I was too stubborn, too independent, not enough like Nathan or Claire. But it wasn't about me. It was about a truth he'd known, or suspected, and punished me for. Every harsh word was a lash for a sin I didn't commit. The realization didn't erase the pain, but it shifted it, turned it into something I could hold, examine, and maybe one day release. Claire called again, and this time I answered, needing her voice to ground me. "Laura," she said, her tone hushed, like she was hiding somewhere in the estate. "Are you okay? Where are you?" Her worry was a balm, softening the edges of my hurt. "I'm safe," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just needed to get away. What's happening there?" She exhaled, heavy and ragged. "It's a mess. After you left, Dad opened the envelope right there and read it in front of everyone." He went quiet, then started yelling for Mom. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, grabbed the paper, and they vanished into his office. 10 minutes later, he came out looking for you, saw the car was gone, and just unraveled. I've never seen him like that, Laura, not in control, just raw, like he didn't know what to do. Her words painted a picture I could barely process. Charles Bennett, the unshakable titan, undone by 3 pages of science. "And Mom?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She's shut herself in their room and won't talk to anyone, not even Nathan. The guests cleared out fast, you can imagine. Dad's been on the phone, probably with his lawyer, and Nathan's ranting about the car, like that's what matters." She paused, her voice softening. "Laura, is it true? The test, is it real?" I closed my eyes, the question heavy but necessary. "Yes," I said simply. "I did it after a genetic test flagged something weird. I used Dad's comb for the sample. He's not my biological father." Saying it to Claire made it solid, undeniable, a truth shared now, not just mine to carry. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you know who it is?" "No," I admitted. "The test only rules out Dad. But Mom's text, she said it was someone from college before she married him. I don't know more than that, not yet." The words felt strange, like I was talking about someone else's life. "Laura," Claire said, her voice fierce, "whatever this means, it doesn't change us. You're my sister, always. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up to him more for all those years he hurt you. I saw it, and I didn't do enough." Her apology caught me off guard, a warmth spreading through the cold ache in my chest. Claire's love, her acknowledgement of my pain, was a gift I hadn't expected, a tether to something real amid the wreckage. "I love you too," I said, my voice breaking. I need time, okay? I'll call soon." We hung up, and I stood by the window, the night stretching vast and quiet, the ocean's rhythm a reminder that the world kept turning, even when mine had stopped. I thought about Dad, his unraveling, the man who'd shaped my life through absence, through standards I could never meet. Had he known all along? Mom's text suggested he did, that he'd married her knowing I wasn't his, tried to love me but failed, his heart too rigid to bend. It didn't excuse him, but it explained him, a man trapped by his own limits, punishing me for a truth he couldn't face. And Mom, her silence, her choice to let me grow up under his shadow, it was a betrayal, but also a sacrifice, a young woman's desperate bid to give me a family, a name. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I could see her now, not just as Mom, but as a person, flawed and human. The Tesla sat outside, its sleek form a reminder of my rebellion, my reclamation. I'd taken it back, not just the car, but the piece of myself I'd offered to a man who didn't deserve it. The road ahead was uncertain. A biological father I didn't know, a family fractured by truth, and a life I'd have to rebuild from the ground up. But for the first time, I wasn't running from that uncertainty. I was driving toward it, eyes open, heart bruised but beating, ready to find out who Laura Bennett really was. Beyond the name, beyond the lie. The morning after the reunion, I woke to the sound of waves crashing, faint but steady, seeping through the hotel window in Encinitas. Sunlight spilled across the room, soft and golden, but it couldn't touch the weight in my chest. Last night I'd shattered the Bennett family's carefully polished facade, left the Tesla humming down the driveway, and carried a truth that still felt too big to hold. Charles wasn't my father. The DNA test had proven it, and I'd thrown it in his face and walked away from his world. But now, in the quiet of this unfamiliar room, the adrenaline was gone, and questions crowded in. Who was I if not his daughter? And who was the man whose blood I carried, the stranger who'd shaped me without knowing I existed? My phone buzzed on the nightstand, Mom's name flashing. I'd read her text last night, her confession about a college love, her plea to meet, but I hadn't replied. Part of me wanted to keep running, to leave her and Dad in the wreckage of their secrets. But another part, the part that remembered her hugs and her quiet apologies after Dad's harsh words, needed answers. I owed it to myself to hear her out, to understand why she'd let me grow up under a lie. I typed a quick reply, agreeing to meet at a cafe in Solana Beach, far from the Del Mar estate, a neutral ground where we could talk without the ghosts of the reunion hovering. The cafe was tucked along a quiet street, its patio dotted with succulents and shaded by striped umbrellas. I arrived early, sipping an iced latte, the bitter chill grounding me as I watched the door. When Mom walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished Evelyn Bennett, the matriarch with perfect hair and tailored dresses. She wore a simple linen blouse, her face bare of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed and weary, like she'd aged a decade overnight. She spotted me, hesitated, then crossed the patio, her steps tentative, like she wasn't sure I'd let her stay. "Laura," she said, her voice soft, breaking on my name. She sat across from me, her hands twisting in her lap, and for a moment we just looked at each other, two women bound by love and lies, searching for a way forward. "Thank you for meeting me," she said finally, her gaze dropping to her coffee cup. "I didn't know if you would, after everything." I nodded, my throat tight. "I almost didn't," I admitted, my voice low but steady. "But I need to know, Mom, who I am, where I come from, why you never told me." The words carried years of hurt, but also a plea, a need to understand the woman who'd raised me, who'd loved me even if she hadn't protected me enough. She took a shaky breath, her eyes distant, like she was stepping back into a life she'd buried. "His name was Daniel Harper," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We met my junior year at UC Santa Barbara. He was studying marine biology, brilliant and kind, always sketching tide pools in his notebook. He wasn't from money, not like my family, and that mattered to them. When they found out about us, they called him a dreamer and said he'd never give me the life I deserved. They pushed me to end it, and I did, because I was young, scared, and desperate to please them." Her voice cracked, and she paused, sipping her coffee, her hands trembling. I listened, my heart pounding, picturing a younger mom caught between love and duty. "2 months after we broke up," she continued, "I met your father at a charity gala. Charles was everything my parents wanted, ambitious, connected, and already building his tech empire. He was charming in his way, and I thought I could move on. Then I found out I was pregnant with you." Her eyes met mine, glistening with tears. "I was terrified, Laura. Unmarried, pregnant, in a world that judged women like me. I told Charles the truth, expecting him to walk away, but he didn't. He proposed, said he'd raise you as his own, give you his name, and give you a future. I thought it was a gift, a way to protect you." I swallowed hard, the weight of her choice settling over me. "But he didn't love me," I said, my voice raw. "He knew I wasn't his, and he punished me for it every day of my life. Why didn't you stop him, Mom? You saw how he treated me, how he compared me to Nathan and Claire, and how he made me feel like nothing. Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Her face crumpled, a sob escaping before she caught it. "I failed you," she said, her voice breaking. I told myself you were strong, that you'd build a life beyond his approval. I was afraid, Laura. Afraid of losing the family we'd built, of hurting you more by tearing it apart. Every time I thought about telling you, the moment felt wrong, the risk too great. But I was wrong to wait, to let you carry his rejection without knowing why. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, not ready to bridge that gap, not yet. I took a breath, steadying myself. Tell me about Daniel, I said, needing to shift away from the pain, to focus on the man who'd given me life, even unknowingly. Mom's expression softened, a flicker of something like love crossing her face. He was alive, she said, a small smile breaking through her tears. He loved the ocean, could spend hours watching the waves, and talked about ecosystems like they were stories. You have his eyes, Laura, that deep hazel, always questioning, always searching. And your curiosity, the way you dig into problems, that's him too. He moved to Monterey after graduation and started a conservation nonprofit. I followed him from a distance, through alumni magazines, then online. He's married now and has 2 kids, your half-siblings, I suppose. He never knew about you. I promised Charles I'd keep the past buried, for all our sakes. The words landed like stones, heavy but grounding. Daniel Harper, a man who loved the sea, who'd built a life of purpose, who shared my eyes, my mind, without ever knowing I existed. I felt a strange pull, a mix of longing and fear, to know him, to see if his world had a place for me. Do you think he'd want to know me? I asked, my voice barely audible, afraid of the answer. Mom nodded, her eyes steady. I think he would. Daniel was kind, Laura, the kind of man who'd want to know his daughter, no matter how late it comes. But it's your choice, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Her words were a gift, a permission I hadn't realized I needed, to step into a new chapter, to claim a truth that was mine alone. We talked for hours, the cafe emptying around us, the sun climbing higher. She told me stories about Daniel, small moments, his laugh, the way he'd sketch her face in the sand. She admitted her own regrets, not just for me, but for herself, for the life she might have had if she'd been braver. I saw her differently, not just as Mom, but as a woman who'd made impossible choices in a world that offered her few. My anger didn't vanish, but it softened, making room for something new, a tentative bridge we could rebuild slowly and honestly. When we parted, Mom hugged me, her embrace fierce, like she was afraid I'd slip away. I love you, Laura, she whispered, always, no matter what. I nodded, hugging her back, the first real connection we'd had in years. I drove back to my hotel, the Tesla's quiet hum a steady companion, my mind swirling with Daniel's name, his life, and the possibility of meeting him. That afternoon, I found his nonprofit online, a small organization saving coastal habitats. His photo was there, a man in his 50s, hazel eyes crinkling as he stood by a tide pool, his smile unfamiliar but somehow mine. I drafted an email, cautious, introducing myself, explaining the test, and asking if he'd be open to coffee. I didn't send it, not yet, but writing it felt like a step, a door cracking open. Claire called that evening, her voice a lifeline. "How's Mom?" she asked, and I told her about our talk. Daniel, the weight of truth settling into place. "I'm proud of you," she said, her words warm, unforced. "You're braver than I could ever be, Laura. Whatever happens with this Daniel guy, you've got me, okay?" Her love, her certainty, anchored me, a reminder that family wasn't just blood, but choice, loyalty, the people who saw you whole. Nathan stayed silent, his absence loud but expected. Dad reached out through his lawyer, a formal letter demanding the Tesla's return, calling my revelation defamatory. I instructed my attorney to handle it. The car was already mine in every way that mattered. The contrast between Dad's coldness and Mom's raw honesty and Claire's unwavering support clarified what I'd always known. Family wasn't defined by genetics, but by who showed up, who loved you through the mess. As night fell, I stood on the hotel balcony, the ocean a dark expanse below, its rhythm steady, eternal. Daniel Harper was out there, a stranger with my eyes, a life I might join, or not. Mom was rebuilding, flawed but trying, and Claire was my rock, always. I wasn't Charles Bennett's daughter, but I was Laura, whole enough, ready to write my own story, one truth at a time. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it led. The weeks after my talk with Mom felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between the life I'd known and the one I was just starting to imagine. The Del Mar reunion was a fading scar, its sting dulled by the truth I'd uncovered. But the road ahead was uncharted. Daniel Harper, my biological father, was no longer just a name. His email reply, cautious but warm, sat in my inbox, a door I'd cracked open but hadn't stepped through. "I'd like to meet," he'd written, suggesting a cafe in Monterey during his next trip to LA. "I'm still processing, but I want to know you, Laura." His words were simple, but they stirred something fragile, a hope I wasn't sure I could trust after a lifetime of chasing Charles Bennett's approval. Yet, as autumn painted the California coast in soft golds, I found myself ready to take the leap, to meet the man whose hazel eyes I'd inherited, whose curiosity ran in my veins. The cafe in Monterey was a cozy spot overlooking the bay, its windows fogged from the morning chill, the air rich with espresso and salt. I arrived early, my heart a drumbeat, clutching a latte like a shield. When Daniel walked in, I knew him instantly. Not from the nonprofit's website photo, but from something deeper, a mirror of myself in the way he tilted his head, the quiet intensity in his gaze. He was taller than I'd expected, his hair streaked with gray, his flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, a man who looked more at home by the ocean than in a boardroom. He spotted me, hesitated, then smiled, a smile that reached his eyes, my eyes, and crossed the room. "Laura?" he said, his voice gentle, uncertain. I nodded, standing, my hands awkward at my sides. We didn't hug, not yet, but we sat, the table a small bridge between two strangers bound by blood. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his laugh nervous but warm. "This is a lot, but I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't know about you until a few months ago. A DNA test, it turned everything upside down." I told him the story, not all of it, but enough. The reunion, the test, the man who'd raised me but never loved me. Daniel listened, his face shifting from shock to sorrow, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "Your mom, Evelyn," he said, his voice soft. "She was everything back then. We were young and thought we could take on the world. When her family pulled her away, it broke me, but I didn't fight hard enough. I never knew about you, Laura. If I had..." He trailed off, his eyes glistening, and I saw the weight of what he'd lost. Not just Mom, but me, a daughter he'd never held. "It's not your fault," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "She made choices, and so did Charles. But I'm here now, and I want to know you, if you're okay with that." My words were a risk, a step into the unknown, but his nod, the warmth in his gaze, felt like a promise. We talked for hours, the cafe's hum fading into the background. He told me about his life, his nonprofit saving kelp forests, his wife, Sarah, who'd cried when he told her about me, his kids, my half-siblings, a teenage girl who loved art, and a boy obsessed with surfing. I shared my world, cybersecurity, my condo in Santa Monica, and the career I'd built from scratch. "You've got my brain," he said, grinning, when I explained my risk models. "Always solving puzzles, seeing patterns where others don't." His pride, unforced and unguarded, was a balm, soothing wounds I'd carried too long. When we parted, he hugged me, a brief, careful embrace that held the possibility of more. "Let's do this again," he said, and I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. Driving back to LA, the Tesla's quiet hum a steady companion, I felt a shift, not closure, but an opening, a new branch of my life taking root. Daniel wasn't a replacement for Charles, but he was a connection, a piece of me I'd been missing, a chance to build something real back in LA. Life moved forward, but it wasn't the same. Work anchored me, my boss praising my latest project, a client presentation that sealed a major deal. "They asked for you by name, Laura," she said. And I smiled, the validation sweet because it was mine, not tied to a family name I no longer claimed. Therapy, a new habit, helped me untangle the threads of my past, the need for Charles's approval that had driven me, and the love I'd sought in the wrong places. Each session peeled back layers, letting me see my worth, not as a Bennett, but as Laura, whole enough. Mom and I were rebuilding, slowly, through honest conversations over coffee or walks on the beach. One evening, as the sun sank into the Pacific, she told me more about her choices, her fear of losing me if the truth came out, and her love that had never wavered, even when buried under silence. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice clear, unscripted. "Not for your job or your home, though those are incredible, for who you are, your heart, your strength." Her words, free of conditions, landed like a gift, healing a part of me I hadn't known was still bleeding. I forgave her, not all at once, but enough to move forward, to see her as my mother, flawed but mine. Claire became my rock, our bond deepening through late-night calls and weekend visits. She hosted Thanksgiving at her San Diego home, a cozy gathering without the Del Mar estate's cold grandeur. Charles declined to come, his absence a quiet relief. "He can't change," Claire said, chopping vegetables in her kitchen, her kids laughing in the next room. "It's not you, Laura. His world's too rigid to hold someone like you." Her clarity, her love, was a mirror, showing me I didn't need his approval to belong. We ate, laughed, shared stories, and I felt a warmth I'd never known at Bennett reunions, a family chosen, not imposed. Charles stayed distant, his only contact a legal notice about the Tesla, which I'd sold, the funds invested in my future, a down payment on a life I was building for myself. His rejection didn't cut like it once had. It was his loss, not mine. Nathan's silence continued, his loyalty to Charles unbreakable. But I didn't chase him. I'd spent too long chasing people who couldn't see me. Instead, I leaned into those who did. Claire, Mom, now Daniel, and friends like Mia, who'd cheered my rebellion from the start. A month after our first meeting, Daniel visited LA again, this time with Sarah and his kids, Lily and Max. We met at a Santa Monica Pier restaurant, the Ferris wheel spinning against a sunset sky. Lily, 16, shyly showed me her sketchbook, her drawings of tide pools echoing Daniel's passion. Max, 13, grilled me about cybersecurity, his questions sharp and curious, like mine at his age. Sarah hugged me, her warmth genuine, welcoming me without hesitation. "You're family," she said, and I believed her, not because of blood, but because of their open hearts. We walked the pier, the ocean's roar a steady backdrop, and I felt a belonging I'd never known, not perfect but real, a mosaic of connections I'd chosen. As winter settled over the coast, I stood on my condo's balcony, the Pacific stretching dark and vast below. The reunion felt like another lifetime, Charles's loser echoing faintly, a ghost I'd laid to rest. I was Laura, daughter of Evelyn, shaped by Daniel, sister to Claire, loved by those who saw me clearly. My career thrived, not to prove anything, but because I loved the work, the puzzles, and the impact. My life was mine, built on truth, not performance, measured by joy, not approval. One quiet morning, I woke without the old reflex to weigh my worth. I made coffee, watched the sunrise, and felt a peace I'd earned, step by painful step. The question of whose blood I carried had faded, replaced by a deeper truth. Family was who loved you, who chose you, who stayed. I'd walked away from a man who couldn't see me and reclaimed a car, a life, and a self I'd given away. The journey wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was ready for whatever came next, heart open, unafraid. If you've ever had to let go of someone who couldn't love you to find your own family, your own truth, I see you. It's hard, but it's worth it. Share your story, your strength, with someone who needs it. You're enough, just as you are, and no one's approval can change that. Thanks for walking this road with me, for believing in a woman who learned to believe in herself.